Hello, and welcome to another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I'm joined today by alumni Kara Watts. We're going to have a conversation that could span a lot of different areas, but as is the case with every one of these episodes I've done, I like to start with one question because I think it's one of the best places to start. Kara, what made you raise your right hand? What made you say, "Yep, I want to go and serve in the U.S. military. This is something I want to do." What prompted you to do that?
Well, if I'd probably be lying if I said that my entire family being military had something to do with that, including my mother's influence. But I mean, growing up as a military brat really made the military like a huge part of my life. So it was kind of a natural step for me. Especially when I was like looking for, I was trying to go to school, looking for funding to go to school, and the military just seemed like the right choice for me. My husband and I actually got married just before joining the military, so we got to join
Okay.
together, and that was just, it just became like the next step for me and being able to like be a part of like my family's legacy and give back to the country and everything. It was for me.
That's great. That's great. That's fantastic. I like hearing from people who grew up in military families. That's fantastic. But you have a bit of well, to say it's unique, I think is maybe everyone has a unique military experience. So maybe that's not fair. But you have a background, and what you did in the military is certainly different than most of the people I talk to, if not all of the people I talk to. So what did you do in the military, and kind of what prompted you to do, like what made you say this is the path I want to choose?
Well, for me, when I joined the military, I actually joined as an admin. So it wasn't like super fancy. It was just it was what was honestly for me, it was what was available at the time.
Sure.
Because I was trying to get in, and open admin was the way to go when you're just trying to get a job. And it was a really fun experience for me actually because it was a lot of like customer service based, and so I always got to help a lot of people out. I became everybody's best friend. Um, Everybody needs to have an admin person on their side. Um,
Absolutely.
but it also was a really cool opportunity for me to just like fix a lot of different kind of problems with like, records or whatever. And so I was always trying to find like new technologies or new things that I could like improve the workflow with. And that's kind of like I've always kind of been tied to computers. And so that was like one of the things that led me this way in the first place. But it was after the military when I did my 4 years.
Mm.
But after the military was when I actually jumped into the unique bit that you're talking about
Okay.
was
Okay.
as I got into animal behavior research is what I started doing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I had thought that you had started that in the military, but that's
No.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. No, that's cool. So that like, and for the record, you're absolutely right. Everybody needing an admin. I was at a Ranger battalion, and one of the biggest mistakes I ever made was letting people know I could write. And when you can write and
Yeah.
type in that world, like I was in high demand with all the
Mhm.
officers, like, hey, we need, oh no, no, no.
Mhm.
So I'm writing training manuals when, I think I'd rather be jumping out of planes and breaking more bones. So anyway, you leave the military after 4 years and you say, hey, I want to go into animal behavior research. What was that?
Correct.
So first of all, it's a big transition, or it seems like it,
Yeah.
admin into animal research. What prompted you to do that, and how did you start to see those connections to the tech sector and using technology as a resource in that process?
Well, while I was in the military, I had it in my head that I wanted to be a veterinarian, and so I was kind of going to school, like using my tuition assistance to pay for that. And I was thinking maybe I could transition over to the army to be a veterinarian, but somewhere along the way, I kind of lost that passion, and I found out about animal behavior research, which is literally just asking the questions of like, why do animals do what they do? And if anybody's ever had a pet, like I grew up with dogs, like you're always asking that question.
Hmm.
And so
Fair.
it was just um something that sounded like a really cool job opportunity for me. So I just kind of like took a dive after I got out and just like, all right, I'm just gonna go to school and see what happens. And I fell in love with it. Um, One of the first projects I did, I was actually working with cockroaches, if you believe it. I was trying
Wow.
to, yeah. We were trying to prove that cockroaches could replace like pigeons and rats in like psychology studies.
Okay.
And so one of the things we did was we built like I built a maze out of Legos, and then we used a camera to like have the ma cockroaches do the maze, and then we started using like different technologies like heat mapping, like they would automatically heat map the cockroaches with from the
Wow.
video input. And
Okay.
it was stuff like that, like all the technologies that I got to use while I was doing animal research that really started to push me towards like, I want to learn more about this. I want to know how to build this stuff because, I mean, while there is a lot in the animal science field, a lot of technology in this animal science field, there's a lot of room for like growth to like
Sure.
improve like our abilities to learn more and capture more. Because as humans, we can only do so much, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But like you can watch an animal for, hours and try to record everything that it does, but you're not going to be as good as a camera.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think
Exactly.
who's the philosopher? Thomas Nagel. He wrote the famous essay called What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And it was basically a philosophical treatise on all the ways that we can never, ever, ever really truly understand what it is like to be another thing, whether that's a bat, a cat, dog, whatever. We can't ever
Hmm.
fully do that. So using the technology, like you're saying, is hugely important to grasping that. So at that time, and this was, I presume, in college when you were doing this, or was this in professional
Yes.
college? Okay, so in college, you're starting to see the kind of the shortcomings of the technology available to help you do these things. Was that kind of what put it in your head to say, hey, maybe software is an answer to this and developing software that can help, or was that later?
It was a little bit later because I went through a couple of different internships where I, encountered more and more technology, and I went and did a master's degree at University of St. Andrews. And that was where I really started digging into coding. For my master's thesis, I developed an agent-based model to simulate gray seal behavior. And
Okay.
so coding that all out was brand new for me. So I had to learn a whole new language just so that I can
Yeah.
do my master's thesis. But that was a really fun experience. And then I actually got a job as a research technician at Disney World,
Oh, wow.
working with their animal science team at Epcot. So
Okay.
if you didn't know, they have like a whole aquarium there full of marine mammals and all sorts
Yes.
of different animals with all sorts of different really cool research going on.
I
And so
can
I got to
imagine.
work there. Yeah. So I got to
That's
work
really
there
cool.
for a couple of years. And it was contract gig. So when that contract
Mhm.
ended, I was looking for the next phase for me. And throughout my contract, I was working on some really cool cutting edge projects like developing a vision simulator to basically be able to create um, a virtual reality guest experience where you could
Okay.
see an environment like a video, but through the eyes of an animal.
Oh, fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So as I was working on different projects like that and my contract was ending, I was trying to figure out what the next phase for me, and I found out about the vet tech program,
Hmm.
um, which is allowing, a scholarship for veterans to go into like go and get uh,
Tech edu.
experience or
Yeah, yeah,
get tech education. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
And and then that through vet tech, I found Code Platoon,
Mhm.
and the timing worked out perfectly. And I was just like, this just seems like the right step for me. And Code Platoon being online made it super easy for me because my husband had a full-time paying job, which was going to
Sure.
allow me to quit my job and do this.
That's helpful. That's helpful.
And being made for veterans and all of the career support after graduation is very much like my draw towards Code Platoon.
Sure.
And so that was it. So I just like transitioned yet again.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like a huge jump. Everybody kept asking me like, why are you doing this now instead of because you spend all this time doing research? Because I was doing research for like 7 years.
Hmm.
But I'm like, it doesn't feel like a change for me because I'm still trying to do research. It's just focused on tech. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely.
Um, yeah. So like right now, one of the projects I'm actually working on um, is a manatee tracker or manatee spotting app,
Okay.
essentially,
Okay.
which allows users to, if they see a manatee in the wild, they could take a picture and then they could post it, and then you'd save this location on a shared map. And then well, just that would be cool to use in general. One of the things that I'm hoping for this app is not only can like people who visit Florida or areas where manatees are, they can use it to find where manatees are in their area, but that scientists can actually use the data accumulated from this app to track like manatee conservation projects and stuff like that. So that's kind of like one of the things that I'm working on and
That's
kind of the
fascinating.
goal that I'm working for.
That's fascinating. So it's like, I mean, it sounds like a crowdsourcing version of a scientist project that you're basically handing to everyone and saying, "Hey, help us track these aquatic, this aquatic life." That's fantastic. So
Exactly.
and I think we need probably to talk a little bit more about that, but let's back up just real quick to the
Mhm.
Code
For
Platoon
sure.
experience, simply because I want to understand how much was your experience at Code Platoon completely new, completely overwhelming, or how much of it did you have a background that said, "Hey, this makes sense"? And the reason I ask that, the context of that question has to do with a lot of people who come to Code Platoon. This is a very foreign thing, right? It's what they're doing is very new, very foreign, and so they have that imposter syndrome that says, I shouldn't be here. I'm in way over my head. But a lot of people draw on what they did, and this is where military people, I think, do better, is that they're drawing on lessons they've learned in their past life. So, what were the lessons that you drew from, and how much did that help make sense of it, or how much of it was just like, this is so much. I don't know what I'm doing.
Um, well, like first of all, I can agree with that because like I said, my experience was very like minimal, especially like the coding languages that we were learning is Python and JavaScript. I had never touched really before starting, like before the couple months before you actually start and they have all those pre-work classes and whatever. So
Yeah,
it was all brand new for me. And But I think the thing that really helps me, for one thing, is like, if you look at it like basic training, like you just do what you're told and just keep moving forward and,
yes.
try not to get stuck up on anything and you're gonna graduate at the end, right? Like you just keep
Right.
working at it.
Show up every day in the clothes you're supposed to be in. That's
Put
all.
in the work, exactly. If you show up, pay attention, do what you're told, I mean, you can't fail. The people are
Right.
there to help you succeed, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Um, But I think the thing that like there are a lot of things. I mean, being able to work like rely on other people, like working in the military, I mean, people have different experiences, but I had a very strong team experience. You work on like you rely on your team members when you're in the military, and you do that when you're in code platoon, right? Like you can't
Absolutely.
do it alone. Like you have to be able to look to your buddy and be like, "Hey, I don't understand this. Can you please
Right.
help me?" Or, be willing to help other people. And that's really what like helps get you through it. And the fact that, we're all veterans, we have that in common, or spouses,
Sure.
we have that in common makes it, I don't, maybe it's easier, or maybe because we have that shared experience of like being a part of something bigger makes us more willing to help. But there's just like I don't know, the cohort cohesion was like there and solid, and it made it
That's
really a
great.
lot better to get through.
And I
And
think
that's
that's
probably
really
one of the
important.
biggest things.
I think that's really important to share with people who, and I think that a lot of people still come to here, and obviously I talk to most people who come to Code Platoon, they come with the kind of the impression of the opposite of what you're describing, which is, I'm going to be locked into my computer and doing all of this work. There is so much teamwork to what goes on here at Code Platoon and in the software engineering world in general. And I think that's important to share because I think that's one of the exactly what you pointed out. People with military backgrounds, they get that. They latch onto that very easily and they say, "Oh, yeah, I've got a team or a buddy. Boom, we're locked in, we're doing this together." So that I think that's huge. So your overall experience at Code Platoon, I take it was positive. I hope it's a good. It was a
Very
good.
positive. Yeah,
Okay,
I
good.
I learned so much more than I thought I was going to, by the end, like from going from not knowing how to, you know, write hello world to being able to build an entire application by myself is just completely wild to me in just the short
Yeah.
amount of time that we're there.
Right, 15
So,
weeks and you're building this
right.
thing. Did you during the program, so you already have it in your mind, you're saying I'm going into animal behavior research, right? That's kind
Mhm.
of your goal. You've already accomplished so much. You've already worked in that field. Did going through Code Platoon and as you're working on these projects, was this spurring ideas to in your future path of saying, oh, I can see how this applies to what I wanted to do already? Or did it completely shift your path into saying, I'm taking this in a whole new direction?
I think if anything, it helped me to like maybe hone in on my focus a little bit.
Sure.
Because, I mean, broad topic, I mean, it's still niche, but broad topic of like, I want to build tech to help scientists. Like, okay, that's pretty broad, but while I was there, I mean, we didn't really do anything with machine learning, but having conversations with the staff and like different um being able to talk to different the people, the guest speakers who came
Yeah, yes,
in,
yeah.
we got introduced to a lot of different topics, and so being able to like even have the discussions with people that leads to more deep dive rabbit hole searches on the internet,
Yes. Oh,
kind of steered
absolutely.
me toward trying to figure out more and self-teach more on the machine learning side because I feel like there's a lot of um, application for that in this field.
Sure.
Um, that primarily. But as far as like completely shifting gears, not really, but just helping you but that was one thing they really focused on too, was helping you like narrow in what your real interests were in the whole, field. So rather than just being like, I want to be a software engineer. Okay, that's cool. What do you want to do?
Right, right. And it, and so that's a great lead up. And I think that's hugely important to share with people too. Yes, we're training the foundational level of software engineer, right? A full stack software engineer, but there's areas of specialty that you can go into. And I think what you bring up is a perfect point that I love to share with people. We have a lot of people from the military who obviously they have it in their mind. They say, well, I want to go work for a defense contractor. Okay, cool. But were you aware that company X over here does some really cool stuff? And maybe it's not a direct defense contracting role, but it does some really cool stuff. So I think that's really important to share. But that ties into, I think, the next step, which is did you at what point after Code Platoon did you start honing in like you're talking about and say there's no way I could have done this project without having that understanding, without having that software engineering understanding? Has that opened up new doors and possibilities that just wouldn't have been there otherwise?
I think when you say software engineering understanding, you just mean like the skills learned, or
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
just yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me make it more general. The skills that you learned at Code Platoon,
Mhm.
did that open up doors in that path that you just wouldn't have seen otherwise, or just wouldn't be available, such as the things that you're working on now, the specific things that you're working on now.
Oh
Does
yeah,
that take
absolutely.
on a new direction because of the skills that you learned, or is it more just kind of like a general, hey, I know more and this is helpful?
I mean, there's definitely the general sense of like I know more, so now I can do things. But sorry, my husband
No,
just
no
walked in.
worries. No worries at all. No worries at all.
So there's definitely the general understanding is very helpful. But because then you just know more things and you could do more. But being able to understand, because when I just got started, I would think about, oh, it'd be really cool to be able to build things, but I didn't really know what that meant or what kind of capabilities we're talking about. But knowing every bit that goes into an application, for example, you're able to really broaden your thought process of like what actually is possible and come up with new ideas that you wouldn't have even thought of without it, right? Because you're like, oh, well, I didn't even think about that being a thing. I can't think of a specific example. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No,
But
that's okay. That's okay.
but there were definitely like things like features and applications or even just considerations about like what you can do. For one thing, when I started thinking about this, I was thinking, oh, I just want to build stuff. But through the process of working on the different aspects of an application, I discovered I really like the back end work, like building the databases, building the APIs, like that, like making things work just clicked more for me than the front end work.
Sure.
And a lot of people found that slotting in like what's their favorite bit. But learning that full stack skill set has
Hmm.
been completely invaluable. For one thing, because now I have a job as a front end engineer or a front end, which I don't mind doing, right? Like I have the skill set and it's still
Sure.
enjoyable, but like it's just not where like my niche was, you know?
Sure. Yeah, the irony here is pretty thick,
Yeah.
Really like the back end stuff, and I'm a front end engineer, but that's
You
okay.
get what you get, and it's
That's right.
okay. I'm starting out. I'm happy to have a job.
And you can do it. I mean, I think that's the
Exactly.
fascinating thing. So that presents an interesting question, though. In this field of animal behavior research, do you see other people recognizing that this is more of a need, or that, is this something that is in abundance in the animal research world? Do we have a lot of engineers who can do this, or is this a situation where a lot of people in the animal research world are saying, "Wow, I sure wish we had more Karas who can do exactly what you do." Does that make sense?
I do. It does make sense. I definitely say I have talked to, because I have a network of scientist friends, because I was
Yeah.
in the field. I have talked to many people, and myself included when I was there, was thinking like, I wish I had these skills, or I wish I knew somebody who had these skills so we could do this thing. Because a lot of the time when you need something specific, if it doesn't exist, which happens most of the time, you'd have to hire a software engineer who doesn't may not have any experience in your animal field, and you have to like work through that communication barrier of like, this is
Sure.
what I need. And there can be a lot of lost in translation when working that way. And it's
Sure.
not that it can't be done, obviously, because contracts happen.
Right.
But
Right.
you don't have to be an expert in a field to build things for them.
Right.
But it's very helpful.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and so, to be honest, that was kind of where I was trying to fill is like there are not very many, but there are few niche positions where people are looking for engineers to fill those slots. And what makes you more marketable for that is if you have experience with that research, because then you can help like bridge that communication gap, right? You understand what the needs are, so you can build like more, I don't know, effectively, efficiently. I don't really know the word there.
No, that's totally fair because but that's, I think, what we do here, and that's what Code Platoon offers. So that kind of leads us to one of the typically last questions of, even though it can open up a lot more questions. You're talking to someone who may be juggling the idea of code platoon, not code platoon, or software engineering, not software engineering. Like, what do I do? What do you tell that person? You're talking to somebody who's getting out of the military, and they say, "Is this a viable path for me?" You say what?
I guess that's a tough question, right?
It is a tough
Uh,
question. It sure is.
Because, I would say if you are interested in software engineering and you don't know where to go, Code Platoon is a fantastic spot for you. Because if you know that you want to get into software, even if you're not sure that you have the skill set, or if you're not sure if you want to be an engineer per se, but maybe you just want to get into it, it's a great start, especially if you can use, your VA funding to get it paid for. They've got scholarships. The people are amazing. The career services are super helpful. Like they can get you into the tech field, right? And you can learn like what are the different branches of it between UX UI design, project management is more than just software engineering, right? But if
Absolutely.
software engineering is the way you want to go, also super helpful. Now, if
Yes.
you don't know if tech is what you want to do, I don't really know what to do for you. You might need to like figure that bit out a little bit. Maybe talk to some of the staff at Platoon because they might be able to help you out.
That's what I'm here
Um,
for. That's what I'm here for.
right, exactly. But but beyond that, if they have any interest in tech at all and that's what they're leaning towards, I mean, Code Platoon is the way to go.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. So transitioning a bit into something else you're doing, and you said that you're not an expert in it, so I'm not going to hammer you with a lot of in-depth questions, but you are part of a group that is kind of sharing bits about interviewing, about how to improve interviewing skills, how we approach it, any number of things. Without getting too in depth, because we won't have a lot of time for that anyway, and that's okay. Surface level, what's the biggest thing you've learned so far in this project? And what is your best takeaway so far? And you're kind of at the beginning stages of this, if I'm understanding things correctly, of learning more about interviewing and how to improve interviewing. What's the biggest thing you've learned so far in that?
Um, I would say the biggest thing that I've learned so far is, first of all, you cannot prepare enough.
Mm,
Like, there's no such thing as being too prepared for an interview. I mean, you need a break before an interview, but don't feel like you can just not practice and be fine because you need practice.
yeah.
Even if you're great at talking. I think the biggest thing as far as the, I guess the biggest thing is to not think of it too much like it's a pop quiz and maybe think more of it like it's a conversation,
Hmm.
right? Like you're there just talking to the person about yourself, but you have to be comfortable knowing, what you've done, and you have to be at that level where you can comfortably talk about yourself like it's a conversation. And that's going to help you a long way versus just like a straight Q&A. If you don't have some sort of personality portrayed in your interview, you're not going to do as well because, just because you have all the credentials doesn't mean if you're not very personable or you don't click with the person, they might not remember you.
Sure.
So that's
Sure.
one thing that we've learned. That and really just as far as the whole process goes, like the whole application process goes, the best thing you can do is network.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Absolutely.
like you can apply to 100 jobs and not hear back from any of them. But if you talk to people and you find people who are like, yes, I will put your resume on this person's desk, and that's going to be how you're going to get interviews. More than like you might get an interview. Statistically, you will get an interview if you put out enough applications, but your chances are way higher if you actually have conversations with the people who will be looking at your interview or looking at your resume beforehand. And that
Yes.
is 100% my experience. I actually would not have my job right now without networking. So,
Yes. No, and I can't agree strongly enough with that. Networking. It's absolutely fundamentally important. So, I mean, the two big takeaways that I hear is you can't prepare enough for interviews, but before the interview, network. Those are two
absolutely.
big takeaways. So now we move into the fun part. Now we move into the lightning round because we're almost out of town, almost out of time. So lightning round, the first question, and these are short answers, fun answers. It doesn't matter how you answer. First answer is tailored to you, that I've never asked anyone, but I'm going to ask you. What was the most fascinating animal to research out of all the animals you researched? What was the most fascinating one?
Oh, let's see. I'm going to say dolphins were the most fascinating. They had the most going on with them.
Okay, I can see that. My limited knowledge of marine biology, I do know that dolphins are super smart and can do all kinds of things. So that makes perfect sense. Okay, second one, totally fun question. Do you listen to music when you write code while you're working, and if you do, what do you listen to?
I can't not listen to code or listen to music while I'm coding. It's just impossible for me. I listen to a lot of usually instrumental, like Honestly, I probably put on way too much EDM while I'm coding, but that's that high tempo instrumental type music
Sure,
just to keep
sure.
my brain going.
And it's fascinating because as I discussed before we jumped on this call, and for anybody who stumbles upon this video, I did do a whole video interview with musicians who have come through Code Platoon, people who are bands, and universally, none of them listen to music while they code. They can't do it. It's too distracting because they're too invested in music that they start sitting there, picking apart the music and going, oh, what is being played here? So people who don't, coders who aren't musicians, listen to music all the time when they work, and musicians can't do it. It's fascinating.
That's great.
Fascinating. At any rate, that's good to hear. Last final question. It's a fun one. Again, what's your favorite movie of the last 2 years?
Fall Guy.
Oh, that was great.
It
I
was
loved it.
fantastic movie.
I
Soundtrack was amazing. It was
loved it.
hilarious.
Keep in mind, I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s, so I watched the show. But it was a great tribute to my, like, I think I was like 7 years old when that show was out on TV, and I loved it. It was great. And so it was a great ode to that era. Perfectly cast. I concur. That was a solid choice. Love it. Love
Truth
it.
be told, I didn't know it was a show until my parents told me, but
It's still, even if you've
but
never
it
seen the
was
show, it's great.
it was fantastic. I didn't even have to think about it because it easily made my top 10 movies all time. So
That's great. No, I loved it because it makes no pretensions about being serious. It's just fun. It's just super fun
exactly.
entertainment. No, I loved it. So tell everybody real quick where they can find what you're doing now, because I think you had a website of some
I
sort.
do. ManateeWatch.com is my app right now. It's still very much in development. But if you want to check it out, see what it's like. If you have recommendations, I'm all about that. Um, I don't have any links on there, but if you are able to, you can find me on GitHub, that would be the best way to do that. So I'm well open for that.
Fantastic. And we'll put that in the YouTube. When we put this up on YouTube, we'll put that in the comments or in the description. We'll put the manateewatch.com. And if people have any questions for Kara, feel free to, I'm not going to share your email publicly, but you can email me, greg@codeplatoon.org. I will put that in the description as well. It's super easy, greg@codeplatoon.org. I'm here to answer any questions people have about coming to Code Platoon. And if you really, really, really want to get in touch with Kara, you can talk to me, and I'll make that connection happen. So, Kara, thank you so much for making a fascinating conversation. I could talk way more probably about this just because I'm completely ignorant of nearly everything you talked about, which is why I think it's fascinating. But I think we covered some really cool topics, and I thank you so much for your time. Any parting thoughts?
Uh, I've got nothing, but I appreciate your time. This has been really fun for me, and just being able to chat about what we're doing and
That's great.
everything that we can do. I don't know. It's cool.
That's really cool. Well, I appreciate it. And thank you for your time. Again, manateetracking.com, right? I got that right?
Manatee Watch.
Manatee Watch.
ManateeWatch.com.
Sorry, I have tracking in
Okay.
my mind. ManateeWatch.com. Again, we'll put it in the description. Thank you again for joining us. And this has been another episode of Veteran Voices in Code Services Software. Thanks. And hit me up at greg@codeplatoon.org if you've got questions. Thanks so much, Kara.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.